Look at this bird. Look. Oh, it flew away. The bird flew away. The bird is gone. Hey, what is up, guys? Kickstarter here. Welcome back to another Brave 9 video. Alright, so this is a long anticipated video. I know I've been delaying this video time and time again, but it's finally here. Angelica versus Edin. Who is a better pick for you? Alright, so in this video, we're going to try to analyze and do a thorough comparison. I'm not sure how long this video will be. I have a feeling it's going to be extremely goddamn long. So, if you have been thinking of recruiting Edin, or either Edin or Angelica, please watch this video first. It might help you make a better decision on things. Alright, so first we're going to compare their stats, we're going to compare the skills, etc, and in the current meta, and perhaps in a few months that's to come, I'm going to let you guys know my thoughts, my opinions, etc, and keep in mind that this entire video, most of these things that you're hearing is just based off my opinion. Alright, so feel free to discuss it in the comments below if you disagree or if you have anything else to add on. So let's move on. First, we're going to have a look at Angelica. Alright, so obviously stats very important. We're going to have a look at what they will have at their max capacity, awaken, max level, etc. So Angelica has 1.9k attack. We have 4.2k HP. Alright, so 10% defense, 25% crit rate, 100% crit damage, 35% agi. So you might have noticed that she has pretty decent stats. Alright, she's a legendary after all. But Edin, on the other hand, will have 2.1k attack, so that's already higher. So 4.4k HP, pretty similar, 10% defense, 65% crit rate, 75% crit damage, but 0% agility. Alright, so this is something that you have to keep in mind. Now in terms of using them for attack, Edin's attack is going to make much more sense than Angelica due to the reason of her skills, which I'm going to explain later. Angelica needs crit damage more than anything else. So they both have pretty similar HP, so whatever that counters them, for example, fixed damage from a Zakan or Cubic or Chalkel, they are pretty much both gonna die. Like, it is just what it is. But there's a couple of things that you need to take note. For example, when fighting against Belial formations, Angelica will be able to perhaps deal with skeletons much better than Edin, especially at a lower skill level for a Belial. Alright, we're gonna touch on that later on, but that's the stats comparison for the time being. Okay, so first things first, in terms of the range, again, very similar. Angelica and Edin, they both have 2 tile range. Maxed out, Angelica needs the plus 15 to be able to get her range up. Alright, you need the plus 15, whereas Edin, on the other hand, will need the plus 10 to be able to activate the second tile range. Now, both of them need extremely high skill level to be usable, but I'm going to favor Angelica right here because she only needs up to plus 12. When you have Angelica at plus 12, she has 65% defense. So that will give her additional 65% defense on top of her 10% base stats defense. So that will means she will already have a 75% defense. So you only need one shield rune at 25% to make her 100% defense. Alright, so 100% defense means that she will not die from any reflective counter from any unit that is buffed by Rafitia. She will still die from fixed damage counter, but not reflective counter in terms of something that Rafitias can provide, or Jin, or Larkis and the likes. Now, Edin, on the other hand, he really needs the plus 15. So this is where the downside of using Edin compared to Angelica, I feel like it's prominent. Edin will need plus 15 to give 35% defense boost if you are looking for that 100% defense. So at plus 14, he only has 20% defense. So plus 15 will give him the 35% defense boost. Now this means that he will have 10% on his own, so 45%. So he will need 55% defense. So something that's not easy to achieve. You need 2 shield runes, each at 27.5%. So you need 27.5% shield runes each, or it can be like 30% and 25%. So which is quite hard to achieve actually. So if you think about it, getting Edin, like building an Edin, is actually slightly harder compared to building an Angelica. So if you are perhaps slightly newer in the game, maybe Angelica might be a better option. Like Edin, still a very solid choice for a lot of players. But then again, you have to weigh in the runes, alright? So having good runes is just something that most players fail to have, alright? It's something that's completely RNG reliant. You cannot like buy runes and try to pay for better stats in runes. It's just something that you have to keep trying again and again and again until you get the proper enhancement and things of whatnot. Okay, so let's talk about immunity for a while. So each of them have one immunity skill. So Angelica has the superior immunity skill, which is debuff immunity. So permanent debuff immunity. So this means that she will not be affected by lots of things. DOT, stats weakening, stigma, etc. Alright, so whereas Edin is not debuff immune. So this is something that players have to keep in mind. So when you build Edin, now Edin does have one immunity skill, which is his awakening skill, which is stats weakening immunity. So this will give Edin the stats weakening immunity that he needs so that his stats cannot be reduced. He does have one particular skill that increases his stats over time, which increases his attack a lot more when he's in the battlefield for slightly longer. So this is something that's perhaps his strongest weakness, not having debuff immunity over Angelica. I've seen time and time again Edin getting stunned, Edin getting frozen, and etc is just something that counters Edin heavily. So now Angelica has the advantage in a lot of situations, in a lot of scenarios. Having the debuff immunity is just crucial. And one more thing that I want to point out, besides something like Glacia or Ludmilla etc, is Celia. Alright, Celia is a good counter to Edin. In fact, Celia can one-shot lots of enemies. So she has this skill right here, which is counted as a stigma and will reduce enemies' stats significantly. Now, while Edin has stats weakening immunity, he is not immune to stigma. Alright, stigma-based attack are slightly different. They are considered as stigma. So same applies for attack interference, like how Glacia's one work as well. So this is something that you have to consider now. Not many players use Celia, I understand that. But if you do encounter a Celia and she is known for her huge Tal range, like you as an Edin user is most likely going to die. Alright, your Edin will not be able to do anything, whereas Angelica can survive that easily. She's not going to receive any damage because debuff immunity. Celia cannot do anything to Angelica at all. Okay, so next up, let's talk about this particular skill right here, which is the permanent advanced curse barrier. So this is something that's similar between Angelica and Edin. You can see the similarity a ton. So basically this is a barrier type of skill that gives them a lot of reduction in incoming damage, increase their defense significantly, and also there's some stats weakening and some enhancement nullifier applied into it. So both Angelica and Edin has the exact same ability incorporated into it, with the exception that Edin has something extra, which is a HP consumption. Now this can be a good or a bad thing. Ideally, this thing is supposed to complement his skill, because one of his skill, which is this particular skill right here, will depend on his HP loss rate. So the more HP he loses, the more damage he will be able to deal to the enemy. Okay, so the curse, stats weakening, and enhancement nullifier, so they are both pretty similar. Okay, so now in terms of damage skill, Edin has this skill right here, which can basically deal with enemies that has 100% defense, because it ignores damage reduction effect caused by defense and deals additional damage. Whereas Angelica's one does not. Angelica relies on having to deal insane amount of damage based on the enemy's max HP. So this is where the difference comes in. Alright, so Edin can deal with 100% defense units, but Angelica cannot. So 1 point for Edin right there. But then again, in most ideal case scenario, alright, so whether you're using Angelica or Edin, I feel like in most cases you are going to use Edin or Angelica to deal with tanks. Now, what do most tanks have in common? Alright, it's not that they have 100% defense. In fact, if you look at the pattern of most of the tanks that were released, defenders I'm talking about, none of them have 100% defense. Alright, you can look at Benshina, you can look at Grand Hildir, you can look at Glacia. So all of them have a unique skill that's gonna give them high amount of incoming damage reduction. For example, Grand Hildir's skill for this particular taunt, she has 65% damage reduction. Alright, so for example, you can go to something like a Benshina, for example. Alright, so if you look at Benshina, what makes her very tanky and very strong is her high HP and her insane amount of damage reduction that comes from this skill, incoming damage minus 60%. So now, while Edin can deal with 100% defense units, now this is where the difference comes in. If you want to use either one of these warriors to deal with tanks, Angelica is just a much better unit to deal with them, because number one, Angelica deals damages based on the max HP, And number 2, this skill right here ignores enemies' incoming damage reduction. Alright, so this can be better against tanks compared to Edin's skill, which ignores enemies' damage reduction effect caused by defense. Alright, so damage reduction and damage reduction effect caused by defense are two different things. So one is based on barrier and one is based off the defense that you have. Alright, so I feel like Angelica is much better in dealing with tanks. Of course, right now in the current meta, we are gonna soon have Velter and Caleron. Like, both of them do not have 100% defense. In fact, both of them have very high HP and very high incoming damage reduction. And I have a feeling that Edin occasionally will struggle in dealing with them. Like, maybe like one-shotting them is like almost impossible unless your Edin has lots of HP loss rate or lots of buffs, basically. Alright, so let's talk about the interaction between Angelica and Edin versus Belyav. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and look at Belyav's skills for a moment and to educate some of you guys who are new. So what Belyav does is she will produce a skeleton in place of their units that die. So that said skeleton will deal damage based on the enemy's attack, not based on this skeleton's attack. So if Edin attacks the skeleton, Edin will deal more damage reflected onto himself compared to Angelica. So the reason why is because if you look at this skill right here, Skeleton Resurrection, so enemies attack times 150% additional damage. So for sure, 100% of the time, whenever Edin hits a skeleton, he will die. So there's no surviving a skeleton for Edin. But Angelica, on the other hand, I have seen her survive before because most of the time, Angelica deals damage based off crit damage. So she does not have as high base attack compared to an Edin because Edin has the attack that increases over time. So unless Belyav is plus 10, most of the time, if you look at Belyav plus 10, 250%, if your Belyav is low skill level, you are fighting like either Edin or Angelica, the Edin will most likely die first, Angelica most likely will survive. Alright, so that's just what I've noticed in terms of the interaction of Angelica and Edin versus Belyav. Okay, one more weaknesses of Edin that I would like to point out is the prolonged battle. So Angelica doesn't suffer when the battle takes place perhaps 50-60 turns after, because her damaging skill, which is this particular skill, will always be consistent. It based off the enemy's max HP, and obviously the more HP the enemy has, the more additional damage she will be able to deal. Obviously this skill can be mitigated by defense. But then again, if you look at Edin's skill, Edin relies heavily on this particular skill right here, alongside with his third skill. Alright, so this is what makes Edin a pretty viable warrior as well. So this advanced lasting crit damage boost will last for 50 turns. Alright, so crit damage increase and attack increase. If you look at this, this will give him insane amount of stats. Alright, he will get incredible amount of stats throughout in these 50 turns, which is what that makes his damage goes extremely bananas and crazy. Alright, so this skill is part of the contribution. Alright, without this skill, he's extremely useless. So I fought Edin from 55 turns to 60 turns onwards. He doesn't deal any damage to my Grand Hill there at all because of the incoming damage reduction. And with just his second skill, even though he has high HP loss rate, but losing that amount of attack, they will get calculated and crit damage as well. He doesn't deal that much of a damage. So I would say in prolonged battles, Edin does not have the advantage over an Angelica. So that's one of the factors that you have to weigh into as well. Okay, you can only do so much by explaining, so let me give you guys a scenario battle. So I have this battle against Kaedan earlier today. So I'm going to show you guys what I meant by that, right? In a scenario like this, you would definitely notice the difference. Alright, especially when you have that Edin being replaced by someone else. Okay, so in this case, the enemy has Rafitia, Edin in the mid lane, Dalvi at the bottom front. Okay, so obviously this is the defense formation for him, so I'm attacking first. But look at this. So Rafitia goes first, Asmuk goes first, and then I have Taylor going in. Boom. So I did not kill the Edin, but notice the Edin is now frozen thanks to my Taylor. So that is something that we can all agree that if that was a Dalvi or Angelica, so that wouldn't have happened. Look at that. The Edin is frozen and is stunned. right? There's only so much you can do as an Edin. So yes, it might not outright kill you, but at this point that Edin is pretty much dead, because what can he do? What can she do right now? So Destiny right now is just freezing away, just waiting for someone to get rid of her. Alright, so I have no idea how long the freeze duration is. Looks like it's 10 more turns. Okay, the stun is almost over, but the freeze is very long from Taylor. So at this point you can see she's still frozen. Holy. And round 2, yeah, there's only, like, if that was someone else in that place, a warrior like a Dalvi and Angelica that has debuff immunity, that would not have happened, and I feel like the outcome of the battle would have been way different. So this is one of the few scenarios, a battle that is applicable it might be applicable to you as well, depending on how you are positioning your Edin. So it's something that cannot be avoided. Okay, so overall, I do think that Angelica will still stay relevant in the meta for a long time. In fact, I will see Edin perhaps dropping slightly later this year. Now, that's just my prediction. Obviously, it's not something that is guaranteed. So everything that you hear from this point onwards is just my opinion. So, like I mentioned earlier, Edin is very useful in dealing with warriors, 100% defense warriors. But if you notice that Edin's skill, he doesn't deal with incoming damage reduction as well as Angelica. And if you look at the pattern of the defenders and all the tanky units right now in the meta, so we're talking about Benshina, Grand Hildair, Glacia, and we have maybe Valter, Celeron. All those units, they have one thing in common. None of them have 100% defense. If you look at it, all of them have incoming damage reduction, high amount of barrier. Like Valter even have 2 separate barriers, which is insane. Alright, so they will be able to take hits from Edin much better than an Angelica. Alright, I'm not saying that Edin is going to be obsolete completely soon, but it's just a matter of time before the developers decide to bring out one extremely strong defender that, you know, have extremely high damage reduction and HP as well. From that point onwards, you can start seeing Edin suffer. Alright, so I feel like Edin might be a much better unit to deal with warriors. Like right now, we are having these 100% defense meta warriors as opposed to Angelica. While Angelica is much better at dealing with the tanks compared to an Edin. But this is the pattern that I'm seeing right now. Let me know what you guys think. Of course, I would love to hear it from you guys as well. Alright, so this is gonna be it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. So let me know what you guys think of this comparison of Angelica versus Edin, and is there any other comparisons that you like me to make? As always, I'm going to end the video here. Thanks a lot for watching. If you're new here, subscribe to this channel. I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a nice day. Goodbye.